Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Sunday Career Success. My name is Bill. I am the company's expert. And what would you say if I were to tell you that for most people, there is a secret weapon for getting hired, and that secret weapon is called volunteering. And a lot of people know about this. A lot of people don't. And so this may apply to you, and this might be something that you need to seriously consider if you're looking for a job right now. And I don't know, things are not really going anywhere quickly. This could be the jumpstart you need because volunteering can be an easy back door in order to get hired. And I just want to say right off the hop, I got my notes on the other side today, and this is I'm trying something a little bit new. But also, this is a live stream, so if you are watching this, there is a chat, and you can ask questions in the chat. For after all, this is a Q&A session, and I'm going to be talking about volunteering as we go through this. But any question is applicable. Any question about getting a job, any question about employment or career, furthering your career or career questions, feel free to ask as we go. Okay, so. Volunteering. Now, usually when I mention this, a lot of people get turned off immediately and they go, oh, I don't want to volunteer. I don't want to work for free. The whole point of this is to make money. That is the whole point of getting a job. Why would I ever work for free? That doesn't make any sense. And I would say to that person, yes, you are absolutely correct. I'm not suggesting that you work for free, as volunteering implies, but rather that you take advantage of the fact that this can be an easy way into an organization that leads to a paying career position. Okay, and that's the way I'm going to be talking about this today. Okay, this is a method for getting a job. It's another vector to get a job. And we have talked about many of these over this live stream. In the past few weeks, we've talked about different vectors, different ways of getting a job. We've talked about obviously, we talked about the posted job market, applying for jobs. We've talked about the hidden job market, about discovering job opportunities. And I've mentioned this several times that, the vast majority of jobs out there are in the hidden job market. They exist, but they are not posted publicly. So we talked about that. Now, to tap the hidden job market, there were several ways. We talked about informational interviews. We talked about different things. There's also growth opportunities and ways to find companies that are hiring in your area. Okay, so this is yet another vector to find a job, volunteering. Okay, now let's think about this for a second. Okay, if you apply for a job and you go for a job interview. Okay, let's think about the job interview for a second. A job interview, as most people know, is a very artificial situation. It's a very artificial encounter. Okay, for a lot of people, you tend to get very nervous because it is an artificial situation. The person that is interviewing you is judging you. They are trying to make a judgment based on a first impression and a very brief encounter with you, where you are not actually demonstrating your abilities. You're not actually doing a job. Instead, you're sitting there talking about you doing a job, right? So it is even more abstract. It's more removed from being able to see what kind of employee you actually are, because you're not even observed in your natural habitat as an employee. So a lot of people find this very nerve-wracking. And then on top of it, they ask some very canned questions. And we've gone through that on past live streams. Very canned questions. Tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Why should we hire you? Questions like this that are very canned. And in response to that, candidates are very well rehearsed, generally speaking, and they have prepared answers for all questions that are designed to obfuscate any failings they may have and draw attention to their strengths. And make an argument and try and be convincing that they have strengths. And so when you put all of this together, it's an extremely artificial situation, and it is most often a bad way of making a judgment about somebody. Okay? I've run a company. I currently teach HR at a university. So I know what I'm talking about here. This is, it's a very poor way of judging somebody, but one would argue that it's the best way we have, the only practical way we have to do this. But in terms of its effectiveness, it is really ineffective. And if you want proof of that, just look at the turnover that a lot of organizations have, because they have hired people that are not a good fit, and those employees leave for one reason or another. And this is very common. Okay, so what do you want in a job interview? Well, ideally speaking, you would want to be taken seriously. You want someone to seriously consider you. And then on top of that, you want someone to trust that, when you make representations about yourself, they are true. When you talk about your traits and characteristics and work history and qualifications, that is all true. Okay, when you have a normal conversation with maybe a coworker or something like that, they are not scrutinizing everything you say. They are going on the assumption that, you are not lying about what you're talking about. But in a job interview, this is not the case. This is why, essentially we fact check our employees or our candidates when they apply for an interview. Just because somebody says, I have a PhD, do you take that at face value? No, you verify that. If it's critical to the job that you're hiring for, obviously you would verify that. The assumption is that you don't just trust what people say. So that is the nature of the interaction when you are doing a job interview. The interviewer does not trust the interviewee and take what they say at face value. They probe, they ask questions that conceal another question, that try and get the applicant to disclose things that the applicant doesn't realize they're disclosing about themselves. Okay, so it's a very artificial situation. A lot of people don't like this, understandably, and that's the nature of the interaction. So that's normally what you would be up against. If you are applying for a job, you have to go through that process. And there are a lot of people that, although they may be good employees, they don't interview very well. They don't, they're not comfortable dealing with that type of interaction. They don't excel at that type of interaction. And this is the problem. Okay? Now, wouldn't it be great if you could have an interaction with a hiring manager, you being a candidate and you would like a job, and you are talking to a hiring manager, that's somebody who has the decision-making power to hire somebody. Okay, they are a boss hiring for a subordinate position, someone who would report to them. Okay, that's a hiring manager. So wouldn't it be great if you could talk to a hiring manager, but you could have a very positive interaction? It wasn't based on this mistrust and, this kind of almost antagonistic, deceptive kind of interaction. Instead, it was more like the interaction between friends or coworkers, where you are not questioning the other person's veracity and truthfulness. You're having you've lowered your guard. You're having a normal conversation with somebody about, whether it makes sense for them to work for you. Okay, if you're the hiring manager. Wouldn't that be great if you were the applicant in that situation? Well, that's what this whole volunteering topic can give you. It can allow you to have that type of interaction with a potential hiring manager at an organization that either you could work for directly and have a career job, or you may not work for them directly, but they can give you valuable things like work experience, access to a network, letters of recommendation, good references, things like this. Okay. Anyway, this is what volunteering can do. Okay. The final thing is that I don't know if anyone who's listening has ever been in the situation where, you are a good employee and you would love to be able to demonstrate this. So instead of having a job interview, wouldn't it be great if you could just work and show them? Instead of talking about how great you are, just show them. If they could employ you for a day or a week and, they could see for themselves firsthand that you're a good employee, you're punctual, you're dedicated, you have the technical knowledge, you have the soft skills. Instead of talking all about it and not have them believe you, wouldn't it be great if you could just demonstrate that? Well, that's what volunteering can give you. So this is something that for many people, they should consider it as a vector, as a way to get a job. Okay? It's below the radar for a lot of people because of the turnoff factor, right? What we just explored at the very beginning. When you say volunteering, people go, oh, no, not for me. I need money. Right? And yeah, that's true. A lot of people have that reaction. They don't realize that, let's pretend you volunteered for 3 weeks and you worked for 3 weeks with no money, with no pay. You're not getting any money. But that 3 weeks sort of free work that you contributed led to a high-paying career job. Now, would that not be a fair exchange? For a lot of people, it would. Especially if you've been out of work for a little while. It's been maybe several weeks and, you don't have a job right now. If you're in that situation, then this makes a lot of sense. So, hopefully I've done a good enough introduction about what this is and maybe perhaps why people should learn a little bit about it. For a lot of younger people, for people changing in careers, for people that have been out of work for a while, this is something worth checking out. Okay, so hopefully I've piqued your interest. Today we're going to talk about the advantages of doing this. We're going to talk about the background of how volunteering works, like, legally and in terms of employment standards, like, where can you volunteer? How does it work? The different types of volunteering, like internships, co-op programs, things like that. And then finally, we're going to talk about how to do this. Okay, so here's like a sort of how-to list or some possible methods that may work for you to actually do this. So we're going to talk about that. And maybe at the very end, we'll talk about some success stories that I have to share in my experience with this. Okay, so that's kind of the plan. So let's dive in. So we already talked about quite a lot of the advantages, actually. Like a lot of, like some other things, like, for example, getting a job in the hidden job market, there are advantages in that there is a lack of competition. Okay? Usually, there's pretty stiff competition for a lot of paid jobs. Okay? So especially posted positions, it's going to be very stiff competition. These days, you post a job on the internet, you get hundreds of applicants. It's, that's just how it works. That would be typical to get lots of people competing for that job. Now, you have a volunteer position. Are you going to get hundreds of applicants? No, that's not what we see. We see a lot less applicants. So in the way into the company, the way to get the volunteer position, the first advantage is that there's a lot less competition. So for that alone, this might seem more encouraging because it is an easier goal to achieve. Okay, so that's what we find with volunteering. Usually you don't get hundreds and hundreds of people beating down the door to get a volunteer position. Okay, you do get a little bit of competition. You get, a handful of people sometimes, right? But it is an order of magnitude lower than any posted position you'd ever put up. Now, the other thing, the other advantage of volunteering from an employment perspective is that, let me put it this way. You guys ever seen the movie Ghostbusters? I like Ghostbusters. I grew up in the 80s and, I love that movie. It came out, 84, something like that. And there's a scene in Ghostbusters where they're hiring Winston, right? Winston was the fourth Ghostbuster and they hired him and they did like a little scene where, they take a clip from his job interview and the woman that was interviewing him, the lady said, do you believe in this? And he said, well, hey, if there's a steady paycheck, I'll believe in whatever you say, right? So that kind of demonstrates this factor. Okay, if you're going for a paid position, especially if you're dealing with a hiring manager is interviewing you, hiring managers care about how dedicated you are and how much you want the job. And this is a very hard thing to probe directly to get that. If you say to somebody, do you want this job? Everybody will say yes. And the simple reason is they want a paid job. Now, some people are actually passionate about that particular job. That work is what they want to do and what they enjoy doing. But a lot of other people, they don't particularly care about that work. They just want the money. They want the compensation, right? So they say, oh yeah, I want this job. Now, as a hiring manager, one of the things you would like to do is separate the people that, just want any job, they just want the money, from the people who are legitimately interested in doing that work, right? Because ideally, those are the people you would hire. You would hire the people that, they're not doing the job for the money. They're doing it because that's what they want to do. That's what their strengths are. That's what they enjoy doing. That's what they have a talent for. You want to find those people and hire them. Now, the great thing about volunteering, one big advantage is that it signals that you are that type of employee. Okay, because if you do a certain job as a volunteer, you're signaling that, look, you don't have to pay me to do this. I want to do this work. Okay, I'm clearly not doing this for the money because there is no money. I'm doing this because I'm getting something else out of it. Okay, what we call intrinsic rewards. I'm getting something, this type of work, this turns my crank. I love this type of work. Maybe if it's maybe a customer service job, I enjoy working with people. I like to be able to help people. That gives me a good feeling. And that's why I'm a great customer service representative. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because, the money's great, but the money's okay, but I like this job. And that's why I'm doing it. Okay. So the advantage of volunteering is that volunteering signals that you are that type of employee. Okay. They don't even have to pay you. You would do this type of activity by choice. Okay. So that's very, very powerful. Now, keep in mind that this applies whether or not you are applying for a job at the company that you volunteered for or a different company. If you did some volunteer work that dealt with customers, okay, that dealt with helping people, that dealt with people skills, communication skills, interpersonal skills, and it shows that you enjoyed it and that you were good at it, and then you go and you apply for a paid job at a second company and said, and you have on your resume, here's my volunteer work where I did this type of work for free. That's very useful. That signals certain things about you that are pretty hard to fake. Okay. And that's how you can stand above the crowd of applicants for that job. You are demonstrating that you have an affinity for that type of work. Okay. So that's one advantage that volunteering can give you. And you don't have to volunteer for 5 years to do this. You could volunteer for 2 weeks. Still works. Okay. Now, the other thing is that if you're applying for a volunteer type position or you're doing volunteering, it's a way to essentially get a job where they're lowering their defenses. They're not scrutinizing and mistrusting you. Usually when you apply for a volunteer position, it's a much more positive selection experience. So it's a much more pleasant interview because people are a little bit more trusting because the motive isn't there as much for you to lie and cheat and misrepresent yourself. Okay. So that's the other advantage. It tends to be an easier process to go through and you tend to have a higher chance of success when you go for a volunteer position. The other advantage is that volunteering is considered real work. Okay, so the work you do as a volunteer, you put it on your resume, that's considered real work experience. Why would this be important? This would be important because maybe you're changing careers, and you have zero experience in the career that you're moving to. Okay, maybe you are changing locations. Maybe like I deal a lot with international students, things like that, people coming from all over the world to where I am right now in Canada. And their number one issue is that they don't have any work experience in their host country, in Canada. So if they want to get a career here, the problem is, it's like the chicken and the egg problem where, you have no job experience here, so nobody wants to give you a job experience. Well, this is a way to break the cycle. You do volunteering here, and that counts as work experience. And you get a lot of things out of it, like I mentioned before, and I'm probably going to mention again, knowing me. Not only do you get the experience, so you can put this on a resume and say, hey, I held down a position here, and also I got reference from my boss, from the hiring, or the hiring manager, if they're not one and the same person. This is in the host country, so I have somebody here who I worked for, not just like a day, but, weeks and weeks and weeks. They got to know me. They saw what I'm like as an employee, and they are giving me a good reference. Okay. So someone can vouch for me here. So that's something that volunteering can give you very easily. And then on top of that, you could they could write you a letter of recommendation. When you're volunteering and you go to your boss or you go to the hiring manager and say, hey, I really appreciate working here. Would it be okay would you be able to write me a letter of recommendation? If you feel comfortable doing that, that would be very useful to me. If you could do that, I would very much appreciate that. And a lot of people, most people would say yes, especially in a volunteer type situation. Okay. So that can be very, very, very useful to have. Okay. So basically volunteering adds real world experience to your resume. Okay. So something to consider. And the other thing I would like to say, basically, is that you would normally do this for short periods. You wouldn't volunteer for 6 months, a year. You wouldn't really do that. You would do it for a couple of weeks, maybe 4 weeks, something like that, possibly 6 weeks, somewhere in there. Okay. So it's really not a huge commitment we're talking about here. So for some people, this may make a lot of sense. Okay. Now let's talk about the background. Let's talk about the background of volunteering, how volunteering works. Can you volunteer anywhere? Well, the answer is a resounding no, unfortunately. Volunteering is a very specific thing. Now, it's going to vary. Like when you talk about the laws and employment standards, it's going to vary depending on what region you're in, what country you're in. Okay. But generally speaking, it works like this. Okay. You see, there are usually minimum wage laws. If you employ somebody, you have to pay them a minimum of this amount, right? Now, obviously, volunteering is, an unpaid thing. So there has to be limits on what counts as volunteering and when you can do volunteering. So a general sort of definition is that when you volunteer, it can only be for a charity, like a charitable organization, or a political organization, like volunteering for the local political party. Okay? That's generally, that's the strict definition of how that works. And that, as I say, that may vary, but generally speaking, that's kind of how it works. Okay, so it has to be a charity. Sometimes it can be a nonprofit, right? Or a political organization. Okay, now within volunteering, there's a couple other things here. There's something called an internship. Okay, so an internship is where, you sort of, it's almost like a more formal type of volunteering. It's like a job. Okay. And the way these work is it can only be for a limited time. So you can't have an open-ended internship. There's a very specific time limit on it. And internships must be approved by the government. Okay. So it's not as simple as an organization, as a company saying, I'm recruiting for unpaid positions to do this. It's funny. A lot of smaller companies get into trouble doing this because they don't know the law. They don't know the employment standards law. If you want to look this up very, very easily, all you got to do is you got to go to Google or a search engine of your choice. And usually, depending on what country you're in, but type in employment standards and then your region, like, your state or your province or, your country. Employment standards, and then your country. So in my case, it would be Canada or the province I'm in, Manitoba. And usually the first thing that comes up is the law itself, so you can easily look this up. Okay, so it's very easy to find out how this stuff works. And then finally, okay, we talked about sort of volunteering, we talked about internships. Finally, there's co-op programs, right? A co-op program is another type of volunteering. That's usually connected with some kind of school or learning institution, academic institution. So this actually, like incidentally, just as a side note, co-op programs can be very valuable to students. So if you go enroll in school, you go and take a program in whatever subject area, and you go and take a certain program at a certain school, like a university or a community college. Some of these will have co-op programs, which means that in order to graduate, in order to get your diploma or certificate or whatever qualification you're doing, they will have a component where you're not just sitting in class taking courses. Instead, you are doing volunteer work in your field at a local company. And that can be extremely advantageous. A lot of students will take the school program just because of the fact that they have a co-op program. So let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that you're learning to be an accountant or a bookkeeper, something like that. You would go to a program where they teach you how to be an accountant or how to be a bookkeeper, and you go through all the courses, but then they do a co-op program where they place you working in a large accounting company doing accounting work for 6 weeks. Okay. And you don't get paid for that work, but first of all, you're working in this big company. Now, if they like you, a lot of times that can lead to a permanent job. So you do 6 weeks for free as part of your school program, but then, maybe you get along well with your boss, then they maybe hire you. And that happens quite often. So that can be a big advantage of those school programs. Okay, so that's a co-op program. So very useful for a lot of people. Okay, so these are some of the legal things. Now, the first thing I said when we talked about the background here was that you can't just volunteer at any organization. If there's, say, a plumbing company, they can't just offer a volunteer position by law. Usually that's how this works, unfortunately. So if you are a plumber and you want to work in, plumbing, it would be awesome if you could just call up and say, do you have any volunteer positions? I'd very much like to help out. And then you're doing plumbing work for free. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it could be a good thing depending on your situation. Don't get me wrong. I understand why we don't do this. Minimum wage and labor laws are very, very important, and it's good that we have them. But the point I'm trying to make is that we can't just volunteer at any company we choose. Most companies, their hands are tied. They cannot offer volunteer positions. Okay. As I said, usually that organization would have to be a charity, like a not-for-profit, or they would have to be a political organization. Or a school. They have some stuff for schools too. Like if you want to work at the school as a volunteer. Okay. Now, how to do this. Okay. Let's talk about how you can actually go about doing this. Well, let's talk about origination, the first kind of step. How do you find out what places you could volunteer at? What options do you have here? Okay. There are many ways. The most obvious way is to call up the organization and say, do you have any volunteer positions? Okay, that's an obvious way. But on top of that, any technique that you use for getting a job in the hidden job market or for getting informational interviews can apply for this. Okay, that's what a lot of people don't know. So very briefly, if you didn't see my live streams on either of those, basically you're broadcasting, you're sending a message to people in your network. And I did a bunch of videos on different parts of this. For example, you could use Google Maps, okay, as a great and very powerful tool. If you're in a specific location, let's say you're in New York City, okay? That's the happening place to be these days, as I understand. You're in New York City, and you want to know what companies or what organizations are near you in New York City that are in the industry that you're wanting to work in. Okay, let's say you're a plumber and you want to know what plumbing companies there are near you. Well, very simple. You go to Google Maps, you type in New York City, right? And then you hit maps, and then you see a big map of New York City, and with you in the center. And then there's a search box at the top. You type in plumbing or plumbing company or something of that nature. And then you see pop, all these little companies pop up on the map. Those are all the plumbing companies. And for each of those companies, it gives you their name. Obviously, you can see their location on the map, where they are in relation to you, if they're like 5 minutes away or they're 3 hours away. It gives you their website. It gives you their phone number. Sometimes it gives you their email address. Okay, so right off the hop, bam, you got a list of companies that are near you, that are in your industry, and those can be targets to approach those companies and see if they do, in this case, volunteering. Now, obviously, they won't if they're a plumbing company, but that's how you find targets. So, okay, you could do it that way. You could do the same thing for charities, nonprofit, whatever specific type, political organizations, all that applies. So you could use this method. Okay. Then you can combine that with the power of LinkedIn. Okay. LinkedIn is a very powerful tool. I've talked about it at length. Because if you know a company, LinkedIn allows you to see inside the company to the individuals. Okay. Especially if you have a big personal network that you've built up, which is not hard. You just get on LinkedIn and start making connections. Very, very simple, especially since Microsoft bought out LinkedIn a few years ago. They've made that even simpler than it was before. So within a couple of months, you could have like a network of 1,000 people. I don't know how useful that is in practical terms, but it is super possible now. Or you pay like $30 or something, and then, you don't have to do any of that. You could just do a search and find people directly. Okay, anyway, bottom line is that between Google Maps and LinkedIn, you find the organizations. Then you find the individuals in the organizations. If you know that a company 5 minutes away from you is John's Plumbing, you can go to LinkedIn, you can type in John's Plumbing, you can see here, there's 25 individuals on LinkedIn that work at that branch of John's Plumbing, and here's who they are, here's their title, their position, and you have the ability to message them directly if you wish. Or if you become friends with them, like you have a connection with them, you'd send a connection request, then you can just talk to them even easier. Okay. So that's the origination stage. That's how you can discover organizations that might have volunteering opportunities. Okay. Now, how to contact them, how to actually reach them. Okay. Obviously, what I just said, you're going to have their email address. You could email the company directly. You could call the company directly. You could use LinkedIn to send them a message to specific individuals, or you could just walk in through the front door if you really wanted to. I know some people actually do that. They apply for jobs in person, and it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually very effective, but not for everyone. A lot of people run screaming from that whole prospect. Okay, so that's how you can contact them. If you're volunteering, you might want to consider doing it in person. Say hi, they can see exactly what they're getting. You look well dressed, and you look professional, and you act professional, and you sound professional. And, you maybe are a little bit charismatic. You got a smile on your face. You're saying, yeah, I'm wondering if you have any volunteer opportunities. I'm very interested in doing this kind of work. I'd very much like to help out. And so I was just curious if you're looking for someone, if you have that, and that can be very powerful. Nothing to be embarrassed about, nothing to be awkward about. It's a legitimate thing. And if they say no, you say, okay, no problem. Well, thanks very much for your time. I thought it was worth a shot. Right? Now, what is the message you send to these people when you're asking for if they have volunteer opportunities? Okay? There's no simple formula, but you can say, number one, hey, I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for if you have any volunteer opportunities. I'm looking to do some volunteering. I'd very much like industry experience, or I'd very much like work experience in this area. I'm very good with people, or I'm very good with this, technical thing. Whatever it is that you're interested in, I'm hoping to learn, and I'm simply wondering if you have any volunteer opportunities. Thank you very much for your time. That's as simple as it gets. And you could say that in person. You could send it in an email. You could send it in a message. You could broadcast that, I suppose, if you have a large network. You could broadcast that like a one-to-many type communication, either on email or on social networking like Facebook or LinkedIn. But I think it's a little bit more effective to put in the time to send individual messages to all the individuals, saying the same thing, but it's an individual one-to-one message. Okay, that's basically what you're going to be communicating, right? Hi, my name is this. I'm very good at this. I have some skills in this area. I'm wondering if you have any volunteer opportunities. Okay, I'd very much like to do this kind of work. I'd like to learn more. I'd like to get more work experience. And if you're looking for someone to help out, I'm very interested in doing it. And, I'm passionate about doing this kind of thing. So please let me know. Let's talk more if you do have some. Thank you very much for your time. Have yourself a great day. Something like that. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but that would be a great sort of way to phrase it. And so that's kind of the deal on volunteering. Now, I just wanted to end off by sharing success stories. Okay, and I've had, first of all, I work in a university that they have a lot of co-op programs, and I know that a lot of students find these co-op programs very useful because, where I work, it's not mandatory that you must do the co-op program. I think about 75% of all students do the co-op program. So, which means that they volunteer in organizations that have partnered with the university for about 6 weeks. Okay, so you go and you take a bunch of classes in the program, and then you go and you volunteer and you do work experience for 6 weeks. You don't get paid for it, but you do get several things out of it. Number one, okay, you can put it on a resume. Number two, you can get references. Number three, you can ask your boss or your coworkers or anyone else there really to write you a letter of recommendation. And a lot of students do this. And that sometimes proves very important, especially if they're international students and they don't have any other experience in their host country. And then also, it allows you networking opportunities. So let's pretend you were an accountant, you're interested in working in the accounting industry. Well, you're now volunteering, doing accounting inside a company that does accounting, and you have access, because you're on the inside now, you're like an employee, you're on the inside of the company, you have access to all the people in that organization. You have access to your boss and maybe some other people that you meet while you're there. And these people are accountants working in the accounting industry in your hometown. There's a lot of advantages in networking with these people because, if you're looking for a permanent position, they may know of one. They may know who's hiring and they may be able to recommend you for it. They may know the hiring manager at another company who's hiring accountants. Okay, so the point is the networking opportunities are very valuable too. And some students take advantage of those and it works out very well for them. Okay, the other thing is that the last thing I want to say is that we talked about volunteering. Volunteering is a way to get a job. It's an indirect way to get a job. And the line can blur between volunteering and asking for volunteer opportunities to informational interviews where, you essentially follow the same process, but instead of asking for volunteer positions, you ask for a tour, you ask for a meeting with the individual. You're talking to a hiring manager at some company, and instead of saying, do you have any volunteer positions, you say, I'm very interested in working in this industry here, and I'd very much like to get, your expert opinion on this industry and where it's going and what some of the challenges are. I'm very interested in learning about that industry. Would you be able to spare me half an hour of your time? I'd very much like to know what you think. And I'm just sort of explaining this in a minute, but it's actually very powerful. This is another very powerful indirect way to get a job. And I've gotten a lot of consulting clients over the years getting informational interviews. So the line can blur a little bit between plumbing companies don't have volunteering positions, but maybe you could get an informational interview. Maybe there are jobs on the hidden job market. And once again, for that, you use a very similar way of tapping those. Okay, same origination, same message, essentially, except you're not asking for a volunteer position. You're asking just, for a posted, like a job position. Okay, so if you do this, you have the opportunity of tapping into any one of those vectors that can lead you to a job and a career job. Okay, so that's pretty much volunteering. At least that's what I have to say about it. I want to thank everybody who's been listening. All the promotional stuff, right? Subscribe. I do this show every Sunday. It's called Sunday Career Success. So every Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Time in North America, I do this show. So tune in where we talk about everything to do with hiring, how to pass an interview, how to write a resume, how to succeed at every level of your career. There's a lot of people out there that are doing sort of career coaching stuff for lower level positions and for people just starting out. What is a little bit more interesting to me is executive level stuff, middle manager level stuff. I had a lot of experience with that and a lot of the complexities that can happen with that. So if you are in that position, that's what I'm interested in talking about. I have a lot of videos over on my regular channel, my main channel called The Company's Expert, link in description. So subscribe to that. This is kind of my secondary channel where I'm just sort of getting my chops down to do live streaming. I don't consider myself very good at live streaming. I find that I don't do a great job, and it's very scattered. So I'm looking for feedback. I'm looking for to develop my skills there. And then maybe I'll take this more mainstream on my regular channel. But pretty much no questions for today. But I hope that you still got some value out of this. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in or for watching the recording of this. Subscribe to my regular channel. I also have a couple of Facebook groups. I've got a Facebook group called Get Hired, The Company's Expert, and I'll put the link in the description. There's about 200 people in that group. If you're looking for a job or you're looking to improve your interviewing skills or your career skills and further your career, join the group where there's a bunch of like-minded people, and then you can share stories and tips and all that kind of stuff. And I also moderate the group and chime in every once in a while. So that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in today. I wish you guys nothing but the best. If you do have any questions, you can contact me at thecompaniesexpert@outlook.com, and I will put that email in the description. And have yourself a great weekend and a great week, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you very much, and take care.